Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Human Pulse podcast, where we talk about living well with technology. I'm Fabrice Neuman.
And I'm Anne Trager.
We are recording this on October 27th, 2024.
Human Pulse is never longer than 30 minutes, so let's get started.
So, Anne, first of all, I wanted to do a little follow-up after our previous episode. We mentioned, your meditation retreat for 10 days. You went on a retreat without devices, with talking to nobody for 10 days. Let me emphasize that, for 10 days, right? You did mention during that episode that your whole rhythm had changed after coming back from this meditation. Even your whole relation to the passage of time and your pace had changed. So I wanted to make sure, how are you feeling now?
That's such a good question, Fabrice. Thanks for asking. I would like to reassure everybody I am fine. So I have noted a few things. One is that I am much quicker to get into the present moment. It means I'm a whole lot less focused on the past and on the future. This is great for my job as a coach. I can really tune into my clients. It also makes me a little bit less reactive. It makes me worry a little bit less about things past or future, which is kind of cool. It is also true that I have a different relationship to time, as if it were no longer the focus. I had already noticed a little bit less preoccupation with time before the retreat, clearly for me at least related to a long time meditation practice. It's not that time has stopped. Let's get clear. It still goes just as quickly as it does for everybody else, but my focus is elsewhere, which creates this really unique temporal experience. I suspect that's also making my brain use a little bit less energy on focusing on time. Oh my God, I have so much to do in so little time.
And
wish. I wish. And maybe putting that energy to something else. In any case, I feel lighter. And it's a bit odd because most of the world I encounter seems to be singularly focused on the passage of time and how quickly it goes. So there's this really weird sensation of not always being at the same pace. I don't mind. It's kind of cool. I'm interested. I'm observing it. That's what you do in meditation, is you observe. I've also found that whole experience loosened my grip, or rather loosened the grip of my inner disciplinarian who regulates my very carefully laid habits and routines. This is kind of a relief, and it opens me up to be a little bit more spontaneous. It feels good. I'd even say I'm a little happier. So the question now is, which habits and routines will bring the most value to me so I can focus on them? And then how can I get the inner disciplinarian to only focus on those and not all the other ones? So that's sort of my rundown.
Yeah, that's very interesting because I think people understood that you're a lot about routines, and having fewer routines or having your schedule being a little pushed around really changed your ways. I would say it really changed. And so you're still on the lookout for finding your new ways, basically. And I thought it was very interesting. Yeah, I thought it was very important to come back to your meditation experience for that, because in essence, it's a long-term approach, right? Which can have broad consequences and changing habits, your habits in this particular example. But that's what it is. And so going back to it was important. And it's also what led to today's subject, right? So why don't you tell us more about it?
That's true. And I really do believe that habits and routines are really foundational for us as human beings to manage our energy in certain ways. And I also believe that to do them right, you have to shift them around from time to time and loosen them up from time to time. Becomes really interesting. So what happened to me is that because I've been less on my old habits and looking around for what's the new scenario going to look like, I have spent a little bit more time on one of my favorite pastimes, which is reading fiction. And I'm currently reading The Murderbot Diaries by Martha Wells, and really enjoying this series. And I thought we could talk about it today because it's told from the perspective of a cyborg security unit, the Murderbot. And this bot is designed for protecting humans. And the storyline, I don't want to give much away, but you learn about this very early on, is that it hacks its way to freedom from its overlord mega corporation. And then in these diaries, it shares with the reader its love of media streaming. I can really relate to that. Okay? and also how unpredictable human beings can be, which I can also relate to.
Yeah. Let me interject here. So we're talking about a robot, a special kind of robot, but you are already relating to it. And
Completely.
That's exactly what the subject is.
Well, exactly. And the author really brings this in really well as well. I mean, she does a really good job on that. So, what I find really interesting is that, well, what I wanted to talk about today is that the worlds described in this book are populated by all manner of bots and augmented humans and other humans with many different types of identity. So I find it to be a really fun meditation about how we as humans might interact with advanced AI constructs and how they might interact with us, particularly when they have some of the human foibles, if you will, that come with having human parts with human DNA, at least in as described in this particular fiction. So we can imagine, I mean, obviously we're so far away from that right now. This is not the reality.
Yeah, let's emphasize the fact that as of today, it's still science fiction.
It's still science fiction, but it's a fun contemplation as what would this mean? Because it really brings out the whole messy complexity of humanness, which is one of the topics of this podcast. And it makes me think of the struggles that, like today, when none of this even exists, we face, and I see in my coaching with diversity and equity and inclusion initiatives, which are all about how we deal with different kinds of people. We recognize these as important, as having strategic value, as having a positive impact on creativity and diversity, and the bottom line. So this is, diversity of different kinds of people and potentially different kinds of entities can have a positive effect. And still, it's really challenging for people. And there are so many things and isms that get in the way on a daily basis of creating this acceptance of diversity. So I'm thinking, if we can't do it with other people, how the heck are we going to do it with tech augmented people or with tech-based entities? And I throw that out to you because you're the tech guy.
Well, thank you. No, I think, first of all, the thing is, that's what can be very interesting about science fiction, thinking about what can happen next. That's exactly the reason. And even with older books, we talked already about Isaac Asimov's books. They still have questions not answered yet, and we talk about them. And so this series is very interesting for that. Plus, it does go well with what's happening today with all those chatbots we now use more broadly, almost like daily for some of us, because they have a very interesting effect, which is we are re-asking ourselves the question of how we interact, period. Not only with other humans, but with other something else. We still have a need for a definition, right? Because we're going back to artificial intelligence, whatever that is, because I don't think we still have a definition for that either. We are talking about AI all day long. We know it's not intelligence. We know it's artificial. Is it not intelligent? Is it just another kind of intelligence? We don't know that. The thing is, as humans, we do anthropomorphize it. They are bots. They are constructs. But we are so used and we are wired to interact with other people that we see those things as not people, but something to relate to, right? And the other thing is we brushed on it in our first episode, for example, talking about the friend.com pendant, which is this thing that you can have around your neck and you can talk to and it can answer. And as the name implies, it's a friend you can have with you all the time, but it's a machine, right? Because some people find it easier to confide in a machine than in a human being at some points, because they want to talk about subjects that are difficult for them. And interestingly, it's also a topic that is appearing in the Murderbot Diaries, but in reverse. And this is also what you wanted to talk about, I think.
Well, yeah, exactly. Because there's this whole thing where the bot is struggling with not belonging, with being different, and this whole notion of belonging is really, really important to human beings. And I think of that with what you just said about how sometimes it might be easier to speak to a machine because it's non-judgmental, or we think of it in that way. And so we immediately belong because, well, we're the human or something. I don't know. Why would we immediately belong to that group, that mini group that's formed? I don't know. This is a question that just came to mind for me. But belonging in any case is really important to humans, and belonging to specific groups is part of that in connection to what I just said. I'm reminded of the work by Jamil Zaki, who is a professor of neuroscience or social neuroscience at Stanford University. And he wrote a really interesting book I recommend, which is called The War for Kindness. And in which he speaks about systems and how we are a herd species, which means that we are deeply affected by other people. And he also then, as the title suggests, talks about how we are wired for kindness with other people. What this means is that when we notice other people acting kindly, then it makes us want to be more kind, for example. And he suggests then that we could incentivize this. We could highlight and amplify kind behaviors to make them stickier and to have more of a ripple effect. And I think that's really interesting. And this actually comes out in a few parts of these books where you see this group behavior impacting bots as well. So it's really quite interesting. So there's that part of belonging. And I was also reminded of a recent podcast I just listened to, which is a little less optimistic, perhaps, but also still really important. The podcast is Adam Grant's Rethinking podcast. And it's the episode that he did with the U.S. Surgeon General, whose name I'm not thinking of right now, but you'll find it in the show notes. The Surgeon General looks at health very holistically. And in the podcast, he talks a lot about the loneliness epidemic and social media, as well as the foundations of belonging and wellness. And he highlights the role of things like service and purpose and belonging in achieving fulfillment and happiness. So there is this really foundational thing about belonging. I mean, in the podcast, the Surgeon General calls us to really prioritize relationships and to cultivate human connection.
That's interesting. The thing is, I guess, to me, what you say about Adam Grant and his podcast it's closer to reality than being wired for kindness. Maybe it's just because of the news, and we also see so much news that are not about kindness, but the opposite, that it's sometimes difficult to be reassured, basically.
So I really do encourage you to read the book, because it is based on science. We are actually wired for kindness. And we also have a negativity bias, which the media monetizes. So bringing out all the negative stuff so that we look at that rather than focusing on the moments we're kind. I mean, in my life, if I look around me, I know a whole lot more people who are kind than those who are unkind. And maybe I'm lucky, or maybe I just see that. Maybe it's part of my rose-colored glasses.
Well, I would agree with that. So not the rose-colored glasses part. But I think, it's a story for another time, but we'll probably talk at some point about the news and how to get news and how to filter out the bubble, if there is a bubble, and stuff like that. So we'll talk about that. But so prioritizing relationships and human connection, it's very important. And so, not that I want to take a dark turn, but this sense of belonging you were talking about and we are all looking for can also, unfortunately, lead to drama. And we saw that in this 14-year-old boy in Florida called Sewell Setzer. He was using an online chatbot called character.ai that lets you choose personalized fictional characters to talk to. And unfortunately, this young man committed suicide on February 28th of this year. And his mother is suing the online service, saying that the conversations he had with the bot led him to abusive and sexual interactions, leading to his suicide. To make it more, let me just add that so he chose as a character to talk to Daenerys Targaryen. I'm sorry about the fans of Game of Thrones series because I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that correctly. But this is the character he chose. And let's not go into details about his conversations with this character. And you'll find in the show notes a link to a description of the whole story from the NBC News website. What I wanted to say is that it's not the first time we hear about someone going very personal with a chatbot. And it can be dramatic, as we saw, obviously, and luckily it's not always, and it's not often that dramatic, but it's sometimes, as far as I'm concerned, a bit just ridiculous. Like, I keep talking about this story of this journalist from the New York Times who described his conversations, like hours-long conversations with the chatbot, all the way to the end where he says that she, the chatbot, was gendered at that time, fell in love with him and basically told him to divorce from his wife so she can be with him, right? So I'm still unclear today whether he really believed it or if it was just clickbait. We don't know that. I don't know that. But I think it serves as a reminder of how we relate to technology when we don't completely understand how it works, and which is exactly what chatbots are all about today, And in the words of the science fiction author, Arthur C. Clarke, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. And maybe in the case of chatbots, indistinguishable from a human being.
I think it's really interesting, the point you're bringing up. And so I'd like to circle around to what do we do then to live well with technology in this sort of murky space of what is it? I mean, I would suggest that we understand human beings about as much as we understand chatbots, and potentially we even understand chatbots better than we understand human beings. That said, so what do we do? And I think there's this notion of being aware and being in a place of choice all of the time. So constantly going back to, well, who or what is it that I am conversing with? And what does it mean? And what are the implications? And these are really interesting questions that we're bringing up. It also makes me think of how astonishing it is that we are so quick to trust technology, much quicker to trust technology than we are to trust another human being. I mean, think about how just today, the tech that you use it to manage your daily lives and needs. You don't really think, a lot of us don't really think anyway about, who's behind all of this, where my data is going, is it really going to tell me the right time to do my things? I mean, we just implicitly think that our tech is infallible until it isn't. Okay. So, and I will invite those of you who haven't listened to the episode about the vacuum that didn't work, the robot vacuum that didn't work, that I will never trust again. And that's what's so interesting, is that actually the basis of trust in technology is, it's not about intentions or moral agency or anything like that. We trust in technology when it is reliable, when it fulfills its function as expected, and it does so consistently. Whereas when we trust in human beings, we're always assessing intentions and integrity and whether the person is going to be trustworthy, is actually going to be trustworthy. It's all based on building relationships, on past interactions, on how we perceive their character to be. It involves emotional factors. It involves social factors. There's empathy. There's understandings. It's very dynamic. It's always changing and it's context dependent. We develop it through communication and shared experiences and mutual understanding, none of which really applies to how we deal with technology now. So in effect, it's normal that we trust it more quickly. And potentially we should be questioning that a little bit more.
I agree. I would say that chatbots blur the line a little bit more because, and even more so when we just use them as, through our keyboards and screens. So we don't actually interact with a face or with a body moving. So we don't have all those signs that we can interpret and that we do interpret. And when we talk to another human being, even without knowing we're doing it. And the line can be blurred. And for example, and so we think that the chatbots can develop, love and feelings and stuff like that. I would say the line is even more blurred when we have humans trying to make us trust robots even more. So I think you know where I'm going with that. Lately, Tesla and Elon Musk presented again, I would say, a new line of robots. They're Optimus robots. And we could see, so there are humanoid robots. They look like, or they are a copy of humans. They have 2 legs, 2 arms, a head, a torso, and they're so humanoids. And they walk around, and it was like the promise is that for in the next couple of years, we will be able to buy one of those for, $30,000. And we can have that at home for, serving us with whatever we need, like a beer or something else, right? Which was weird. The thing is, what I wanted to say about it is that, unfortunately, it's difficult to trust their new announcements because very soon after the whole presentation shebang, we actually learned that all the robots we saw were not autonomous, basically. They can walk around easily. That's okay. That's mastered, but they don't talk. They don't interact as they were shown to be interacting. We saw videos with people, talking to them, playing with them, just chatting, like shooting the breeze. But robots are not capable of doing that yet. And at least not those robots from Tesla. And so it's interesting. So the trust issue here is not with technology, but it's with the humans presenting the robots. And I think it's too bad because we can have robots that we can trust and that can help us, probably more than robots in the humanoid form, if you will. And what I wanted to say about that is, aside from all those robots that are shown to look like us, there are other robots. So we already know that we have robots like building our cars. They are not humanoids, right? They are just like arms, mechanical arms that can solder and what have you. So I would encourage people to go see a video from the Veritasium YouTube channel. There will be the link in the show notes, of course. The name of the title of this video is "The Real Reason Robots Shouldn't Look Like Humans." And it's a fascinating demonstration of what robots can be, aside from being humanoid. Because when we design robots that are not like us, they can do so many more things than we can. And so I think it's a good way to think about robots a different way and not just of something that can look like us.
And I like the point that you're bringing up, and that, there's a form factor involved here, and that evidently just having a human-shaped body is not what it means to be human, because there's all the rest that goes into human communication that we're not there yet with humans, and that potentially the robots can do something else, like things we can't do because we have a human body, and so they can have a different shape and do other things. Thank you for bringing that out. So I think that's it for today's episode. I believe we have reached our time for today. Thanks everybody for listening. You can find all of the links mentioned in this episode in the show notes directly in your podcast app. And don't forget to go to our website, humanpulsepodcast.com, to find out more information and all of our previous episodes. We also love to receive feedback, so don't hesitate to send us some. humanpulsepodcast.com.
Thank you, everyone, for subscribing, sharing, and please leave a review if you can.